Good evening and welcome to Poland Daily News. I'm Nicholas Richardson. Both the station's former director, Agnieszka Romaszewska-Guzik, and opposition politicians stressed that Belsat TV was a window to the world for millions of Belarusians. It was considered undesirable by the Russian regime. Meanwhile, the Polish government has de facto led to its liquidation. Why?
There is a television station whose journalists fighting against the Russian and Belarusian regimes were locked up in prison. Today, Donald Tusk's government is deciding to close Belsat TV and the foreign ministry to cease its funding. Why? Today I'm taking a closer look at the situation. For the fact that we created this channel, ran it for Belarus but also for Poland, for our common cause, 15 people paid with imprisonment. At the moment 15 people are sitting in prison, journalists or cameramen. The kind I see in front of me, paid with imprisonment for 3, 5, 8 years. The longest sentence is 8 years, and these people are still sitting there, and this work that they created has been liquidated at this very moment. It has been murdered. I can't define it any other way. Belsat TV was established in 2006. A year later it began broadcasting. It gave Belarusians and peoples from the former Soviet Union access to independent information in their country in Belarusian, Russian, Ukrainian, as well as in English. Above all, it was a counterweight to Russian propaganda. Now the station is to be decommissioned.
Cui bono? Cui bono?
Who will gain from the fact that Minister Sikorski, Prime Minister Tusk and his political acolytes today want to murder Belsat TV? Because it certainly won't benefit the Belarusian opposition, it won't benefit Belarusian culture, it won't benefit Polish security. The opposition is sounding the alarm. It is not just television, but a tool in the fight against Russian propaganda. Belsat TV was declared undesirable by the Russian prosecutor's office only a few months ago. This is because its task, according to Russia, is to discredit the internal and foreign policy of the Russian government to create a negative image of Russia. Meanwhile, Belsat reported on the true face of the Russian regime. We built our soft power in this way, which is also worth mentioning. For nearly 18 years, it did not occur to anyone to liquidate the Belsat channel. Today, Belsat is being liquidated. We protest against this. We oppose such an action. This is the destruction of Polish foreign policy. This is the weakening of civil society in Belarus. This is ultimately the weakening of the Belarusian opposition. Law and justice politicians appeal to the government to halt the decision to liquidate the only independent Belarusian TV station, Belsat. The importance of the Belarusian regime's free media, which gave resistance to Russian propaganda, especially from enemy territory, is well known to Belarusians. Fear and censorship currently prevail in Belarus. Belsat TV is also a place where Belarusian citizens can hear their mother tongue, i.e. Belarusian, because on state television and state media in the public space, there is only the Russian language. Polish journalists are also warning. This is not a game for Belsat TV, it's a fight for life and death, one can say, for the freedom to provide information to people who live in a country like Belarus. This is really a misunderstanding of what Poland's raison d'etat is, what Belsat TV's tasks are, what freedom of speech is all about. The mission to also bring free speech to other countries, because, after all, that was exactly the mission of Belsat TV. Belsat TV has led that mission until now. Now all foreign language channels under the TVP banner are to be incorporated into one organizational structure. Belsat as an entity ceases to exist.
We won't take a step back, repeat Georgian protesters who have been demanding since Thursday that the government changes its decision to suspend accession talks with the European Union for as long as 4 years. The Prime Minister of Georgia, Irakli Kopachidze, says the situation is under control and there will be no second Maidan uprising in Tbilisi.
The protests are gaining momentum by the day. More labor groups are joining the demonstrators to stand shoulder to shoulder demanding pro-Western government policies.
So I'm an English teacher and I'm standing here not only for myself or for my family but for my students as well. We do deserve to be part of EU and we will never give up until we get whatever we want.
Tear gas, water cannons, or police brutality seem to make no impression on the protesters, as everyone here knows that the future of Georgia depends on the outcome of the demonstration.
I think it's a duty of all citizens to stand here. To be honest, for me, it's not the case just whether we will be in European Union or no. It's just a tool for us. So for me, as one citizen, democracy, freedom of speech, social welfare, and everything which is related to the European community is important.
Georgia's prime minister has no intention of changing his decision to suspend talks with the European Union for 4 years.
So the attempt to organize the Maidan in Georgia is already over. I would call everybody to keep quiet, let's say, and to keep peace in this country. So we are responsible for that. I can assure everybody that there will be peace in this country.
These words certainly will not calm the mood on the streets of Tbilisi and other Georgian cities. Another night of protests, more clashes with the police. Behind me, you can see police troops and a big cloud. It's a cloud of tear gas. But Georgians are not giving up. They are fighting. They are determined. But they realize that without the help of the West, they might not win this fight. According to some protesters, the most effective thing would be to impose sanctions on representatives of the Georgian government and also to include the names of ruling politicians and their family members on the European Union blacklist.
Actions, only actions, not the words, only actions. That's it. We are doing our best. That's it.
The protesters add, however, that possible penalties or sanctions must not affect ordinary Georgians.
Expect help from the West because we know the history of Georgia, we know the repressed people of Georgia, and I think that...
For now, the State Department has announced that the United States is suspending its strategic partnership with Georgia. On the 16th of December, the EU Foreign Affairs Council is expected to decide on possible steps towards Georgia, including the possibility of lifting visa-free travel.
Talks are underway in the United States about a new diplomatic initiative to bring about a ceasefire in Gaza and the release of hostages still held by Hamas. Israel's Strategic Affairs Minister Ron Dermer flew to Washington this week to meet United States administration officials. Meanwhile, Donald Trump has accused the Joe Biden administration of failing to deal with terrorists. What kind of action has the president-elect announced?
20-year-old Idan Alexander has been held hostage by Hamas for 423 days. The American was kidnapped by terrorists during an attack on Israel. In a video recorded by the militants, Idan speaks directly to the president-elect.
Dear President Trump, my name is Idan Alexander. I am an American Israeli citizen currently being held captive in the Gaza Strip. As an American, I've always believed in the power of the United States, and now I'm sending my message. Use your influence and the full power of the United States to negotiate for our freedom. Every day here feels like an eternity, and the pain from inside grows.
The reaction of the newly elected American leader was immediate. Donald Trump issued an ultimatum to the Hamas terrorists. If the hostages are not released before 20th of January 2025, the date on which I will proudly take office as President of the United States, there will be all hell to pay in the Middle East for those responsible for these atrocities against humanity. The efforts of the United States administration under the Democrats have so far yielded meager results. The hope for Eden's family and the relatives of other hostages is decisive, and tough action by Donald Trump as the future leader of Israel's greatest ally, the United States. I did not sleep that night. Eden gave me strength and hope that I will see him again. On the 7th of October last year, Hamas terrorists invaded Israeli territory, murdering, raping and kidnapping. Of the more than 250 captured, about 60 are still alive. Anything that brings us closer to the release of the captives is of inestimable value, and I hope for the release of every hostage. The hostages are being held in inhumane conditions. They are being starved and tortured. Every day the terrorists threaten them with death.
I'm calling all the leaders around the world and also Trump. We still got their hostages that are alive. We need to bring them all back home.
There is also hope for peace in the Middle East for people on the other side of the conflict. Ordinary Gazans who see Donald Trump's campaign promises as a chance for a normal life. We are waiting for Donald Trump. He promised world peace, unlike his predecessors who did nothing. We want Trump to bring peace and end the tragedies of many people. Donald Trump is clear about his priorities, including world peace and the restoration of core values. That is why the president-elect proudly accepted Emmanuel Macron's invitation to attend the reopening of the Notre Dame Cathedral. He is coming to us even before he is sworn in, and I think that this will be his return to the international stage. This will indeed be Donald Trump's first foreign trip since winning the election. On Saturday, he flies to Paris for an inauguration ceremony attended by nearly 50 world leaders, including President Andrzej Duda. Notre Dame Cathedral, an architectural gem, a World Heritage Site and a holy place for all Catholics. 5 years ago, it was almost completely destroyed by fire. French prosecutors concluded that the fire was accidental. Careful reconstruction has restored it to its former glory. The ceremony to open the cathedral will last 2 days.
Heavy fighting, terror in captured cities and Russian withdrawal. These are the last hours of the civil war in Syria. 3 superpowers have entered the game, each with its own interest there, and each, with the hands of soldiers on the front lines, will try to achieve its goals.
Lines for bread and gas, no water, no electricity. This is the new reality in Syria's largest city, Aleppo, home to more than 2 million people. There is no bread. Everyone comes, all the guys from the area. They have no working bakery, so they come here. It's crowded. We sat here for 2 hours, waiting in line. On top of that, airstrikes. The Russians, who support the Assad regime, are bombing everything they can. They treat the lines of civilians as rebel groups. The effects are nightmarish.
We are verifying numbers. I can tell you that I've seen some of the data which is coming out, and it suggests that there are certainly dozens upon dozens have been killed.
There will certainly be more casualties. The assault on another major city, Hama, is now underway. Later Homs, and then the capital, Damascus. This revolution, why did it happen? It happened for justice, for freedom, for democracy. It happened so that the Syrian people could choose their political leadership through free and fair elections, and so that this leadership would be held accountable. In practice, this revolution is the aftermath of frictions between greater powers. It's hard to say that it was provoked, but the fact is, there is a geopolitical chess game going on right now. The Americans are carrying out airstrikes against Iranian militias trying to support Assad. The Turks are seizing the moment to attack the Kurds, and finally, the Russians are trying to support the Assad regime by weakening American influence. In the middle of all this is Iran, which has found itself in a very difficult position. We should not allow terrorists and conspirators to start another war and bloodshed in the region. We must try to do so through diplomacy and coordination with neighboring countries. This is an appeal to Turkey, which is actively supporting one of the rebel factions. The fall of the Assad regime will cut off Iran from Hezbollah and Lebanon. However, Turkey is playing its own game. Erdogan is already playing the role of father to the entire Middle East. We have been saying for a long time that the spiral of violence in the Middle East could also affect Syria. Recent events have confirmed that Turkey was right. Russia is trying to prop up Assad because it needs Iran for arms supplies, but so far, it has been completely unsuccessful. In addition to chaotic airstrikes, Russian forces have been forced to retreat to their naval base on the Syrian coast, their only foreign naval base. One man currently holds the Russian Federation by its throat, Erdogan, the Turkish president. Without Turkish permission to cross the straits, and without Turkish permission to fly over Turkish territory, the Russians can do absolutely nothing. So the question is whether the Turkish plan for this Russian contingent in Syria is to boil the frog. Russia is facing a major dilemma: leave Assad and thus Iran, or redeploy some units from Ukraine. This is well known to the Americans, who are adding fuel to the fire by attacking pro-Iranian militias.
I think Russia will try hard, and the question will be, how much are they willing to do, considering they have Ukraine to be concerned about, and of course they're now, concerned about Georgia.
The war in Ukraine, political turmoil in Georgia, trouble in the mountainous Karabakh, civil wars in Africa, and finally the offensive in Syria. Having meddled in various regions of the world over the past 3 or 4 decades, there are now fronts opening up for the Kremlin that they seem to have completely forgotten about.
The president of South Korea has declared martial law. According to news agencies in Seoul, this has to do with the impeachment proceedings against him. The president himself reportedly announced an increased threat from North Korea and accused Kim Jong-un's regime of trying to destabilize South Korea. Hours later, members of the South Korean parliament voted to lift martial law.
The president announced the imposition of martial law following a meeting at the Defense Ministry with commanders of all major branches of the military. He said martial law was to protect South Korea from communist forces from the north. In a televised address, the South Korean president accused opposition politicians of conspiring with the North Korean government. Western analysts said the move may have been prompted by the president's pending impeachment. 190 of 300 members of parliament showed up for a nighttime vote, some climbing over walls to bypass the military, which was blocking their entry. All 190 voted to end martial law. This did not end the dispute, however. The military announced that martial law would not end until the president said so. In response to the vote, the president ordered the arrest of members of parliament. Koreans took to the streets of Seoul, demanding the arrest of the president for attempting to stage a coup. As of December 3rd, 2024, at 7 p.m. GMT, the situation is still developing, and it is unclear how this will all end.
That's the news. Thank you for watching from me. Have a good night and a better tomorrow.